Picture this, the most visceral, blood-spilling combat sport on Earth, happening right on the pristine, manicured lawns of the most powerful political residents in the world. Welcome to this explainer on UFC Freedom 250. This wasn't just some highly anticipated fight card, guys. It was an absolute cultural anomaly. I mean, literally the first ever professional sporting event held on the South Lawn of the White House. Today, we're going to unpack exactly how federal landmarks, massive corporate sponsorships, and primal cage fighting all spectacularly converged on a single, unforgettable summer night in Washington, D.C. Okay, let's dive into this roadmap. We're going to start with a macro-level look at this White House spectacle, then break down the insane logistics and controversies. After that, we'll see how things boiled over before the battle, jump right into the four-round war itself, and finally, look at the ultimate aftermath.
All right, part one. A White House spectacle. Let's look at exactly how the UFC met DC.
Let's move to and see how this builds, because the timeline here is absolutely fascinating. This whole idea, it was actually first floated by President Donald Trump during an Iowa rally way back in July of 2025. It seemed like a total wild hypothetical at the time. But fast forward to March 2026, and the UFC officially dubs the event Freedom 250 to tie right into the 250th anniversary of the United States. And by June, man, the takeover of the nation's capital was absolute. You had top-tier fighters stripping down for ceremonial weigh-ins right on the marble steps of the Lincoln Memorial on June 12th. All of this building up to June 14th, which, by the way, coincidentally is Flag Day and President Trump's 80th birthday, when the very first punches were finally thrown on the South Lawn. Moving into part two, logistics and controversies. Because as you can imagine, making a cage fight happen at the executive mansion meant navigating an absolute maze of federal red tape and political storylines. Let's talk numbers. The cost of putting on this event ballooned to an estimated $60 million. Now, the absolutely crucial point here is that the UFC covered this massive budget entirely on its own. Literally no taxpayer funds were used to put up the cage or host the event. That $60 million budget even included roughly $700,000 earmarked specifically just to repair and restore the South Lawn's historic grass after that heavy octagon and all the broadcasting gear were finally packed up. For a venue of this magnitude, the live audience was actually incredibly intimate. Capacity was strictly capped at around 4,300 invite-only seats, and this was all due to Level 1 SEER security measures. To put that into perspective, Level 1 SEER is the exact same top-tier federal security they used to lock down the Super Bowl. Because of that, these highly coveted seats were strictly allocated. A large chunk went to active military personnel who, fun fact, actually had to meet specific fitness standards just to attend in uniform, while the rest went to a super exclusive list of VIPs, heavily divided between the White House, the UFC, and TKO corporate executives. But we really have to contrast that invite-only vibe with what was happening just down the street. The UFC definitely didn't want to entirely ice out the public, right? So they set up a massive public viewing area at the Ellipse, capable of hosting up to 85,000 fans. Tickets for this massive overflow area were completely free. It featured a full festival-style fan experience, even including a live concert by the Zac Brown Band, who actually later crossed over to the South Lawn to perform the national anthem for the main event. However, the financials of the night definitely weren't without scrutiny, particularly when it came to fighter pay and corporate synergies. Get this. A brand new $250,000 Performance of the Night bonus pool was added to the card just days before the event. The controversy? Well, this bonus was uniquely sponsored by World Liberty Financial, which is a cryptocurrency venture co-founded by the Trump family. And the bonuses themselves were actually paid out in the company's USD1 stablecoins. And this brilliantly illustrates the concerns some experts had. As financial watchdogs pointed out, specifically crypto expert Todd Phillips, while economically, this is really just like writing a check. Functionally, it acts as a massive global advertisement for Trump family business. By paying fighters this way, it explicitly linked a private venture to both the global broadcasting reach of the UFC and the profound historical prestige of the White House. Naturally, this deep intersection of corporate and political interests triggered some legal action. The Public Integrity Project actually filed a lawsuit attempting to block the event entirely, citing the president's recent purchase of up to $50,000 in TKO Group holding stock as a major conflict of interest. Ultimately, though, a federal judge refused to block the fights. On top of that, because the White House is federal property, the local D.C. Combat Sports Commission flat out refused to sanction the event without their standard, pretty hefty permit fees. This actually forced the UFC to bring in the Association of Boxing Commissions as an independent third party just to regulate the bout.
All right, part three, boiling over before battle.
Let's pivot from boardroom logistics to the deeply personal fighter drama that erupted right at a historic monument.
At the Lincoln Memorial press conference, the tension just finally snapped. Undefeated lightweight champion Ilia Topuria, fueled by what he felt were deeply disrespectful comments made by Justin Gaethje regarding Topuria's recent divorce, literally shoved Gaethje on the stage. Topuria vehemently vowed to defend his family's honor, promising the crowd he'd put Gaethje to sleep in just 2 minutes. Gaethje, on the other hand, remaining uncharacteristically cool and calculated, firmly denied crossing the line or attacking Topuria's ex-wife. Instead, he just mocked the champion, calling him an emotional little animal. The psychological stage was perfectly set for absolute violence.
But what actually happened inside the cage? All the geopolitical posturing, the multi-million-dollar logistics, the intense legal battles. Honestly, none of it mattered once that cage door locked. It was time for a fight. Part 4. The 4-round war. Time to dive into the visceral, action-packed narrative of this undisputed lightweight championship main event. The momentum in this fight swung violently back and forth. Round 1 immediately opened with a chaotic phone booth brawl. In round 2, Topuria nearly ended the whole thing. He dropped Gaethje with a devastating combination, took full mount, and relentlessly hunted for an armbar. Gaethje barely survived the round. But in round 3, a bloodied Topuria began to noticeably fade. Gaethje pressed the action, culminating in a thunderous head kick just before the bell sounded. So the crucial point is how Gaethje weathered that early storm. Because by round 4, Topuria was running on pure survival instinct. Gaethje stuffed a desperate takedown, trapped Topuria in a front headlock, and delivered a sickening knee to the body. Topuria survived the round on his feet, but his face was completely unrecognizable. His corner made the call and stepped in to stop the fight. Justin Gaethje had just pulled off the unthinkable upset. Standing in the center of the octagon, battered, bleeding, and utterly exhausted, Gaethje delivered an instant classic post-fight interview. He told Joe Rogan how he intentionally embraced the immense fear of embarrassment against an undefeated killer like Topuria, specifically so he could tap into his most primal place. Looking at the massive swelling and deep cuts on his own face, Gaethje just laughed, celebrating his thick-ass skin and his unyielding warrior spirit. It was just a moment of pure, raw humanity. Finally, Part 5, the ultimate aftermath. Let's zoom back out to assess the historic legacy of this entire night. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the absolute statistical anomaly of what occurred. Every single fight on this historic card ended in a violent knockout or TKO. Literally not a single bout went to the judges' scorecards. From Cyril Gane finishing Alex Pereira with brutal efficiency, to Diego Lopez starching Steve Garcia in just 2 minutes, the White House crowd witnessed an unrelenting, historic parade of pure finishes. It made this event a massive statistical outlier in the long history of the UFC. And the surreal imagery certainly didn't stop when the fighting did. Moments after Gaethje had his hand raised in victory, his ecstatic parents were brought right into the cage and then formally introduced to President Trump and the First Lady. It was such a bizarre, intensely striking juxtaposition. I mean, you have high society political royalty shaking hands with the emotional family of a bloodied cage fighter standing right on the manicured lawn where foreign heads of state usually mingle. Just wild. UFC Freedom 250 proved that when billions of dollars, immense political will, and the raw, undeniable entertainment value of human combat combine, literally any venue is possible. But it leaves us with a massive question. After merging federal landmarks, massive corporate sponsorships, and primal cage fighting, where on earth does the spectacle of live sports go from here? Think on that. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the world around you.